So, May 13 was the feast of Our Lady of Fatima. And Fatima is one of the better known, more well-known Marian apparitions. The others would be Lourdes in France and Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico. But Fatima, certainly. And Fatima is very relevant today. And as we will see, especially including what is happening in Russia and in the church. Now, whenever we pray the rosary, you might not know it, but Fatima comes into the picture because that's when our Mama Mary asked us to add a particular prayer to the rosary. We pray after each decade of the rosary. O my Jesus, pardon us, save us from the fires of hell, lead us also to heaven, especially those in most need. So, Fatima is very, very relevant to all of us. This appearance of our Blessed Mother was in Portugal in 1917 to 3 shepherd children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta. And in 1917, she appeared 6 times, once a month, on every 13th of the month from May to October. And Mama Mary asked them to pray the rosary daily for world peace and for the end of World War I. The apparitions, these were controversial. They were very much criticized by secular and even religious authorities. At some point, the children were even put in jail. And the mother of Lucia actually wanted them to admit that they were lying, that everything that they had been saying about seeing the Blessed Mother was actually not true. And the kids were told that Our Lady would reveal her identity on October 13th. So for 6 months from May, and then the last appearance would be October 13th. And Our Lady said she would reveal her identity on that day and perform a miracle. And this is what has been known as the miracle of the sun. On May 13, the very first time that Mary appeared to them, the children saw a woman brighter than the sun. Now, that in itself is very, very relevant, because when we read in Revelation 12, verse 1 about Mary, she was the woman clothed with the sun. So you can imagine what brightness we're talking about, what brightness the children were seeing. So, Our Lady identified herself as the Lady of the Rosary. And she asked the children to pray the Rosary every day to bring peace to the world. And the kids actually were not really telling anyone. Maybe they themselves were so surprised, or for sure they were believing but kind of wondering what this is all about. So they would not tell anyone. But Jacinta told her mother, and the mother told her neighbors kind of as a joke. So, it was something, wow, what is this all about? So, okay, she didn't believe it, but she told her neighbors anyway. But within the day, the whole village already knew what was being said, already knew about the apparitions of Our Lady. So every month, she would appear. 1 month, the children actually missed her coming because they were placed under detention. But anyway, Mary was continuing to appear regularly. And then on October 13, there was already a huge crowd that were waiting for the miracle that was promised. And newspapermen, media, people from all over, the rich, the poor, they were there in Fatima. And there was a huge crowd of, the estimate was about 70,000. So some people were saying, no, it's up to 100,000. And in those days, there was heavy torrential rains. The rains were really pouring down, and people were drenched, and the ground was muddy. And then suddenly, the dark clouds broke, and the sun appeared as a spinning disc in the sky. And the sun was dancing in the sky. It was zigzagging, and then it would swoop down, seemingly going down upon the peoples, and this frightened a number of them. And it also was that the people could look directly at this very, very bright sun. So this was happening. The sun was dancing for about 10 minutes. That's a long time. And later on, the people realized that their wet clothes were already dry. The wet, muddy ground was already dry. It was part of the miracle. Now, these apparitions happened right before the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which happened in November 7. So the last apparition, the miracle of the sun, October 13. And then November 7, the Bolsheviks took over Russia. And Mary had been saying to the children, there is a need to pray for Russia. And if Russia is not consecrated to God, then she will spread her errors throughout the whole world. Now today, there is the World Apostolate of Fatima, formerly known as the Blue Army of Our Lady of Fatima. And the World Apostolate of Fatima has always associated Fatima in the context of the Cold War. Because this is around the time that all of these things were happening. And by and through the Rosary, they were hoping to achieve world peace and end communism. So, Fatima, how people were seeing it in relation to what was happening, the Bolshevik takeover of Russia, communism was very much a factor in this whole scenario. Now, the children were told three secrets, known as the three secrets of Fatima. And the first secret was a vision of hell, where Our Lady said, where the souls of poor sinners go. Now, note to the modernists, because the modernists in our church today say there is no hell. Or if there is a hell, there is no one in it. Because they say that, the love, the mercy of God will not allow that people will be condemned forever. Well, if you believe Fatima, and the Church of certainly has already approved Fatima, there is a hell. The children were given a vision, and they were frightened. And there were very, very many people there. It was a terrible place. So there is a hell. And Catholics today, especially these modernist pastors, go back to Fatima. Now, the second secret, Our Lady recommended a devotion to her Immaculate Heart. So, a devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And the intent was to save souls and for peace in the world. And the Lady predicted the end to the First World War. The First World War started in 1914. So this was 1917. And so Our Lady predicted the end to this war, but said that there will be a worst one if people do not cease offending God. And she said that, if there is this second great war, it will be presaged, it will be preceded by the night being illuminated by a great light. So another sign that would possibly happen if the peoples of the world would not cease offending God. And Our Lady said to avert this second war, Russia should be consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and also to have the first Saturday's devotion. I'll speak about that towards the end. And Our Lady said, if this is done, then Russia will be converted and there will be peace. But if not, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, and there will be wars, there will be persecutions of the church. So that was 1917, and in the later years when Lucia would say a little bit more about this secret. Now, in January of 1938, so we're now into 1938, in January of that year, there was an aurora borealis. These are what you call the northern lights. And these are lights playing in the sky, different colors, and really awesome sight. If you're in Alaska, if you're in Russia, the northern lights. So there was an aurora borealis over the west, the northern hemisphere of the world. And it was the widest recorded since 1709. So for over 200, almost 230 years, that was the widest aurora borealis ever recorded in the world. In fact, it was so intense and so widely seen throughout the world that people in different parts of the world thought that there was a great fire happening around them, and they were notifying the police, the fire departments. So that's how intense that fiery sky was. Now, that's January 1938. Remember, our lady said that there would be a sign, and that was it. Because a month later, Hitler seized Austria. Then 8 months later, he invaded Czechoslovakia. And in September 1939, World War II formally started when Hitler invaded Poland. So what Our Lady has said, there will be a greater war unless Russia is consecrated and unless people repent of their sins. They did not, and so it happened. And World War II was upon the world. Now, the third secret was about a vision of the death of a bishop in white, whom people say or assume is the Pope. And this bishop in white is going up a steep mountain when he is killed. He is assassinated by soldiers using gunfire and also arrows. And very, very problematic vision, and very hard to figure out what was that really all about. And Lucia said that secret should be released to the public by 1960. So remember, the visions at Fatima in 1917, but they were not really revealed to the world. Now, for this third vision, the two previous visions were revealed earlier, but for this third vision, Lucia said it should be released to the public by 1960. But the Vatican only published this third secret in June of 2000. In June of 2000. Why? We don't know. talk a little bit more about that a little later. But you can see how, because it's so problematic. And what is this all about? What is this vision all about? And I guess people could not really figure it out, and there's more to it actually. Okay, now, since we've been talking about Russia, and Russia is very much a component of Fatima, let's take a look at this whole aspect of the conversion of Russia. And again, as Our Lady said, if Russia is consecrated, then there will be the conversion of this nation, and there will be an era of peace. At that time, so we're talking May to October 1917, the Bolsheviks, the communists, they had not yet taken control of Russia. So when the time that the apparitions came, and this is precisely why our Blessed Mother, part of the reason why she was showing herself and telling this to the children. So up to October 1917, it had not yet happened, but it did happen the next month, in November, when the Bolsheviks took over Russia. Now, there were various of the popes that did some kind of consecration, but people say some way, somehow, it just was not the right formula. There was Pius XII in October of 1942, but what he did was he consecrated the entire human race to Mary, and there was just a special mention of Russia. So that was not quite it. That was not according to the instructions. Then there was Paul VI in 1965 at the end of the Second Vatican Council. And he actually was renewing the consecration of Pius the 12th. But renewing it, that kind of consecration was not according to how it should have been. So that wasn't it as well. Then there was John Paul II in March of 1984. But he made no explicit mention of Russia. And also many of the bishops did not join in, because it's supposed to be consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary together with all the bishops of the world. So John Paul II had no explicit mention of Russia, and many of the bishops had not joined in. Maybe he had not really invited them. And at that time, the Cold War was ongoing, and it seems as if there were a number of cardinals who were very cautious. They didn't want to cause any geopolitical problems by actually specifically mentioning Russia. So that did not suit what Our Lady intended. In Lucia in 1985, so this is John Paul II in March 1984. In 1985, Lucia reiterated, Russia is to be consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, simultaneous with all the world's bishops. So we come now to Pope Francis. And as you know, because he is very, very fairly new, in March this year, 2022, he did some kind of consecration. But basically what he did was he consecrated all of humankind, especially Ukraine and Russia. So I don't know. People are at odds. Was that the right formula? Did that satisfy the requirements of our Blessed Mother or not? Was it just supposed to be Russia, very, very specific, as in this case, all of humankind, but especially Ukraine and Russia? So it remains to be seen how this consecration would go. Now, let me leave that for a moment, and let me go to the third secret of Fatima. This is a constant controversy even up to today. And basically, the question is the secret fully revealed or not? The church has said that, yeah, the secret has been fully revealed. But there are other sources, and there are skeptics, and there are witnesses supposed to be that say no, that it has not been fully revealed. Now, what seems to be in this secret, and some say, it contains information regarding the apocalypse and a great apostasy that is to be led by a pope. So this is what people say. Now, are these conspiracy theories or whatever? But I'm just saying that there's great controversy even up to today. But there are also those who say that Mary had warned of an evil counsel in the church, and it said, do not change the Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, which has been changed to the what most of us know as the Novus Ordo Mass of today. So all of these are the things that are swirling around, and we really don't know what really is going on. But then there is more. Father Gabriel Amorth, he was the chief Vatican exorcist for a long time. And he did, in his lifetime of over 30 years of doing exorcisms, he did 70,000 exorcisms. So you will say that he's quite familiar with the devil, and he's quite familiar with how the evil one infiltrates into people and into the life of the world and even the life of the church. Now, Father Gabriel Amorth, so those are his credentials. No? He said that Padre Pio, now you know Padre Pio, Saint Padre Pio, with the stigmata. He said, Father Amorth said that Padre Pio said, the third secret is about the infiltration of the Vatican by Satan and the rise of a false church. Wow. But this is Padre Pio. And this is the chief exorcist saying, this is what Padre Pio said. That the third secret is about the infiltration of the Vatican by Satan and the rise of a false church. Then there was this Cardinal Mario Luigi Chiappi, who was the personal papal theologian to Popes John the 23rd, Paul the 6th, John Paul I, and John Paul II. So, quite a renowned man, quite an important man. Cardinal Chiappi, personal papal theologian to 4 popes. He said, the great apostasy in the church would begin at the top. So yes, there would be a great apostasy, but that it would begin in the top, because we know, even today, we all can see, and we all have been talking about it. So many lapsed Catholics, so many turning away from the faith. So the apostasy is there. It is very clear. But here, even at that time, from some time ago, talking about this beginning at the top. Now, could this be the reason why the third secret was not fully revealed? First of all, at that time, because the first 2 secrets were revealed early on. But again, Lucia said the third secret not to be revealed until 1960, but the Vatican actually revealed it only in the year 2000. So, could this be the reason? And you can imagine, if this was actually what was contained in the third secret, you can imagine at that time the shock, the fear, the consternation, the the trouble that would have happened, the panic that would have happened in the church. And so you can understand if this is all true, why the Vatican, the popes, through the years would not reveal it, or if that even today it has not been fully revealed. But what are we to make about this apostasy in the church that would happen from the very top? You know, there have been other visionaries, other Marian apparitions that have pointed to a severe crisis in our church, including at the top. I'll cite some of them. In the early 1600s, there was Mother Mariana de Jesus Torres. She lived from 1594 to 1634. She was a Spanish nun in Ecuador. And she had visions of Our Lady of Good Success. And the visions had to do, what Mary revealed to her, about, according to Mother Mariana, a crisis in the church in the 20th century. That is last century, no? Because the 1900s, because we are already now in the 21st century. So a crisis in the church in the 20th century, where the light of faith would be almost extinguished. This is what Mother Mariana revealed. Early 1600s, okay? You know, talking about the 20th century. Okay? Now, in the early 1800s, there was Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. She was an Augustinian nun in Germany. She was a stigmatist. She had the wounds of Christ. And she had a vision about Satan unchained for 50 or 60 years before 2000. So that jives very well with the what was shown to Mother Mariana about the crisis in the church for in the 20th century. So this is Satan unchained for 50 or 60 years before 2000. In 1846, the apparition at La Salette, France, and to two children, and that was the appearance of Our Lady of La Salette, where she talked about the future apostasy of Rome, and Rome as the seat of the Antichrist. So, 1846, Our Lady of La Salette, future apostasy of Rome, and Rome is the seat of the Antichrist. 40 years later, in 1886, Pope Leo XIII, he had a vision of a deeply demonic infiltration upon Rome. I think when he was saying Mass, he had this vision and he stopped and he was petrified. And so he composed the prayer to Saint Michael. This is the prayer that we pray today. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. So he was led to compose that because of this vision of deeply demonic infiltration upon Rome. That's 1886. And then in 1961 to 1965, this time, 4 young girls at Garabandal, this Our Lady of Garabandal, who said that many cardinals, bishops, and priests are on the road to perdition and taking many souls with them. Well, that's like the modernist pastors and hierarchs in the church today, who are on the way to perdition, but unfortunately, tragically, taking many souls with them. So this is what Our Lady has been revealing to different people in different settings through the centuries, but all about this time. We are now in those times that were being talked about. So let's take a look at the pastoral implications for today. First of all, with regards to Russia, and secondly, with regards to our church. First of all, Russia. And we've seen Russia is a key figure in Fatima. And again, in 1917, up to October, when the operations were happening, Russia was not yet communist, but the consecration was not done, so the Bolsheviks took over the next month, in November 1917. So Russia became communist. Later on, in 1922, the Soviet Union was established. So this was not just Russia, but many other Eastern European nations were added and became one nation, the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, 1922. Then 1939 was the start of World War II. Now in World War II, that was Germany, and of course here in Asia, Japan, the Axis powers. In that war, the Soviet Union was on the side of the Allies versus Germany. The Russians, the USSR, was against Germany on the side of the Allies. And of course, we know what happened. Germany was defeated, Japan was defeated, and there was peace. But in 1947, started what we call the Cold War. And this was the West against the East. This was the Western powers against the USSR. So the hot war had ended. And again, remember, the USSR was on the side of the Allies against Germany and Japan. But Germany and Japan were defeated. And now there was this Cold War between these two powers, the West and the East, starting 1947. In 1949, 2 years later, NATO was established. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is the Western defensive pact that was established. And of course, on the other side, on the USSR, the Warsaw Pact. So that's the Cold War that was happening. And what happened during these times, the Soviet Union did spread their errors throughout the world. Communism throughout the world, not just the Eastern Europe, but in other parts as well, Cuba and other parts of the world as well. Now, ultimately, the Soviet Union fell, and the Cold War ended, and that was in 1991. And when the Cold War ended, when the Soviet Union fell, that should have been the end of the Cold War. And I personally believe that NATO should have been disbanded at that time, because NATO was a defensive alliance against the Warsaw Pact. Now you have no more enemy, so you disband. There's no more reason for it. But unfortunately, NATO continued and even expanded. And this is part of the problem that we see happening in the world today. So the Soviet Union was dissolved, and Russia, the biggest nation in the Soviet Union, today, or after that, from 1991, under the new leadership that came about, Russia today is no longer communist. Russia today is no longer godless. In fact, according to their pronouncements of the Russian leadership, Russia today is pro-God, pro-church, pro-family, pro-life, anti-abortion, anti-LGBT. The complete opposite of the godless West. So that is the Russia of today. Now, of course, there are still problems. I mean, you had a long, long time Soviet Union under communism. It was godless. But now, with the fall of the Soviet Union, now Russia is no longer godless. But it still struggles with abortion, with alcoholism, suicide rates are high, prostitution. So that's the case with all other countries as well. But by the pronouncements of the Russian leadership together with the church, Russia today is totally different from the godless Soviet Union. Russia today is pro-God, pro-church, and anti the culture of death. In fact, one clear manifestation of that it's not just posturing by Putin or a few leaders. In 2013, so this 9 years ago, in 2013, the Duma, which is the Russian parliament, they voted 436-0 to ban homosexual propaganda from schools. This is what is plaguing the West, especially the United States today. But in 2013, the Russian parliament, they voted to ban homosexual propaganda from the schools. 436 votes to 0. I mean, that is a manifestation of where the leadership in Russia, where they stand with regards to faith, family, and life. And of course, Mama Mary has always been considered the Tsarina of Russia, the Tsar, where the former rulers of Russia before the Tsar was overthrown by the Bolsheviks. But Mama Mary has always been considered as the Tsarina of Russia. Mama Mary is very, very prominent. She is very much looked to and venerated by the Russian peoples. Now, according to Lucia, according to Mama Mary, God has a special plan for Russia. God will use Russia for the chastisement of the world, but also in order to bring the world back to God. So you see how per Fatima, Russia is such a key component, such a key aspect. When you talk about the whole world, used for the chastisement, but used for the renewal of the work and bring the world back to God. And it is here where you can understand the assault, the continuing assault of the evil one upon Russia. It can start from the time of the Bolshevik Revolution, because prior to the Bolsheviks, under the Tsars, Russia was very Christian. And Russia, which included Ukraine at the time, was the primary as far as the Orthodox Church was concerned. The center was in Constantinople, but it was the Russian Orthodox Church that was predominant. So Russia was very, very Christian. And then the communists took over, and Russia became godless. So you see the assault of the evil one. And today, Russia is back to being godly, but is being assaulted by the godless West. The West, starting with the United States of America under the Democratic Party of Death, but also the liberal European powers, the European Union, so which are all very much anti-God, anti-family, anti-life, and who are strongly pushing the culture of death, using the United Nations, using their influence. Biden telling the U.S. embassies to fly the LGBT flag in U.S. embassies together with the American flag. Can you imagine that? And the U.S., the EU, pushing this anti-God, anti-family, anti-life agenda throughout the world. LGBT, just pushing so very much on that. And so we talk of this assault of the evil one by the godless against the godly. And I think this is where we will now situate the war in Ukraine. And for many people, Russia and Putin have been vilified and are seen as the villains. And that is because, Western media has presented, that's a lot of lying, by the way. And I'm sorry to say, but many of you would not be seeing much of what is happening except what the Western media brings out. But there's a lot of lies, there's a lot of distortion, there's a lot of misinformation about the Ukraine war. And so Russia and Putin have become the villains. They're the bad guys. But that is not the simple case of all of this. In fact, very recently, Pope Francis himself, in a way, blamed NATO because he said NATO was, quote, barking at Russia's door. How? By its expansion. Because for a long time, this is what Putin, this is what Russia was saying, this is the red line. Do not push NATO up to the borders of Russia. But this is what they have been doing. So Pope Francis himself, who has no sympathies for Russia and is in fact sympathetic to the West and to Europe, he said that NATO was barking at Russia's door, implying that a big part of the fault lies with NATO. But there are many things that had happened. Because prior to 2013, Ukraine had a pro-Russia leadership. But in 2013 to 2014, there was a coup that removed the pro-Russian leader. And this coup was instigated by the CIA, the American CIA. And this documented, you can see videos on this. But there was a coup, so pro-Russian Ukraine became anti-Russia. And in fact, there were many in Ukraine that were, of course, they were kin to the Russians. And they were together for a long time under the Soviet Union and in the Orthodox faith. And, they had a natural affinity, the Ukrainians and the Russians. But the leadership the new leadership in Ukraine, pro-West, anti-Russia, began to persecute the Russians, the Russian-speaking ones, the Russian sympathizers. And so many things were happening there. But that's why what happened also in 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, and there were two separatist regions of Ukraine called the Donbas that were pro-Russian because they'd always been pro-Russian. Crimea had a referendum where they voted overwhelmingly to be with Russia. And they had always been with Russia. They had always been a part of Russia. So that was not an annexation or a seizing of someone else's territory. But it was the people themselves wanting to be restored to how it had always been. So anyway, but Russia had always given its red line. Even when the Warsaw Pact was dissolved, the Soviet Union collapsed, Gorbachev, talking to Reagan, that's the assurance that he was seeking, that NATO would not expand. And that was the red line. And through the years after that, up to today, up to Putin, that is what they had been saying. This is the red line. Do not expand to the borders of Russia. But one by one, NATO convinced the European nations to join NATO, Poland, and all of that. And now Ukraine. Ukraine is right at the border of Russia. And even today, Sweden and Finland, who had always been non-aligned, are applying to be part of NATO. And Finland has a very, very long boundary with Russia. So, this was the violation of the red line. And I cannot blame Russia. Here is NATO. We should have been disbanded because the Cold War was over. But now is aggressively adding nations, and now have come into the border of Russia. And that was the major reason why Russia invaded. I'm not justifying Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Ukraine war is terrible, and the losers in all of this are the Ukrainian peoples. But there is a lot of geopolitical shenanigan happening, even a spiritual war that is happening in all of this. And brothers and sisters, this is not over. I can't understand the lunacy of the thinking of the West in doing all of this. The Ukraine war can stop right now, and Putin has always said this. It can stop right now if Ukraine will just renounce its intention to join NATO. In other words, it will not be part of NATO. And then, of course, Putin also wants official recognition that Crimea belongs to Russia, and the Donbas region, the so-called separatist regions now, would be independent states. But that is a fait accompli that is already there anyway. So this war could end. And Putin has always said this. But no, the U.S. and NATO, they keep sending lethal arms. And it's been said that U.S. and NATO will fight to the last Ukrainian. Poor Ukrainians. They are the pawns in all of this. But unfortunately, they have a president who is also very much with the culture of death. President Zelensky is seen as a hero by others, but he is all in with the culture of death. He is anti-faith, family, and life. Now, with all of these things that are happening, the war goes on. They're now at the borders of Russia. Finland, with a long border with Russia, is going to join NATO. Now there's the threat of World War III. And this is, if this happens, this is a war with nuclear powers. And so, it's the chastisement of the world. Did that already happen with the Soviet Union spreading errors throughout the world? Or is it still something that is going to happen? There is talk of the annihilation of nations. Will this happen because of nuclear war? So, it's a terrible thing. But that is how, Fatima and Russia, how all of these things are playing out. Now, let's take a look at the second big element or aspect of Fatima. And that is the great apostasy in the church. And so, many have said that Fatima is about prophecy and also eschatology. Eschatology means end times. So Fatima is about prophecy. This is what's going to happen, and this is what will happen in the end times. So again, Padre Pio spoke of the rise of a false church. Cardinal Chiapi talked of apostasy at the top. Is this actually what is happening today in our church? Is this the modernism that is there? That is with Pope Francis himself? You know, there have been a number of bad popes before. I count 11 from my research. Really bad popes, murderers, sex fiends, lustful individuals, homosexuals. But these really evil popes before, they did not tell people to do the wrong things that they were doing. In other words, they were bad people. They were doing these things, but they did not change the teachings of the church. They did not say, okay, I'm into homosexuality, so this is what you should do as well. They never did that. But today, when you talk of the modernists, what they are teaching is contrary to the authentic faith. Contrary to the authentic faith. Saying LGBT is okay, same-sex unions can be blessed, and all of these other modernist teachings. And so today, many Catholics, especially the lay people, but including clerics, they are confused, they are lost. And this is part of what is leading to even greater apostasy, an apostasy that has been foretold through these apparitions. So today, the culture of death, because of modernists, are being accepted in the church. A gay man is told that you are born that way, which is not true at all. No one is born gay. And then there's always the talk about political correctness. Just accept and accompany the sinner, but don't talk about the sin, because it is offensive. It seems that the greatest sin is to offend people. But when you correct people, then you offend people. And you need to correct people in order to get them out of their sin. And then there is the blessing of same-sex unions by clerics. There are LGBT masses being celebrated. There's communion being given to irregular unions. All of this under the watch of the hierarchs of our church today, and being done by clerics in many different parts of the world, especially in the Western world. This is apostasy. This is what the severe crisis in the church that has been prophesied and is actually happening now. So, my dear brothers and sisters, in the face of all of this, what do we need to do? Okay, first of all, we need to have the proper attitude toward Russia. Now, Russia cannot be out of the picture because per Fatima, Russia is a major, if not integral component of this whole Fatima operation. So Russia is there, will be there, until the request of Our Lady is fulfilled, so that there will be world peace, until the plan of God, including Russia, will be fulfilled. So Russia will always be there. So we need to have the proper posture toward Russia. And Russia will need to be consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary according to the dictates of Fatima. I personally don't think that it happened with Pope Francis. I hope that it did, but I'm sorry, I'm skeptical, but that needs to happen. Now, in the meantime, the evil one wants the world to hate Russia in order to destroy her. And the evil one is using the godless West, of course. The evil one will use the godless powers that be to go against those who are pro-God, pro-family, pro-life. And again, unfortunately, Ukraine is a pawn in the globalist agenda of these elites. The New World Order that every now and then we talk about. You see, the reality is Ukraine is a leader in LGBT, in surrogacy, in biolabs. And then there are the neo-Nazis that are trained by the CIA. This is what Ukraine is all about. There is the corruption of the Bidens. President Biden through his son Hunter Biden, their dealings in Ukraine, their corruption that is obvious to everyone. There is the ethnic cleansing that the Ukrainian government was conducting in the Donbas region, the eastern part of Ukraine that was pro-Russia. And many of these things were part of how Putin figured out that he needed to invade Ukraine. President Zelensky of Ukraine has said very recently to President Biden of the US, I wish you to be the leader of the world. And Biden said, there will be a new world order and we have to lead it. This Biden, the terrible person, that fake Catholic who is very rabidly pro-abortion, pro-LGBT, and pro everything that is against against Christ and His church, who is full of corruption, aside from being incompetent. And President Zelensky says, I want you to be the leader of the world. And Biden says, yes. That's what we've been about all of this time. There will be a new world order, and we, the U.S., will have to lead it. So, the godless West has advanced right to the border of Russia. And it's a classic anti-God versus pro-God. It's a classic battle. It's a battle of evil and good. This is what is playing out. And this is the reality that you need to realize. Fatima was about the defeat of communism in Russia, and that's already done. That already happened. But interestingly, ironically, it is the West. You see it in the U.S., how the Democratic Party is doing everything and running everything. It is the West that is moving to socialism and to communism. And this new world order that is being talked about is all about totalitarian socialism and communism. So it is very ironic because the errors of Russia will indeed be spread, but not by Russia, but rather by the West. If the errors of Russia are about communism, it is not the Russia of today that will spread these errors, but it is the West that has moved on to socialism and communism. How truly ironic. We have here right before us, playing before us, and unfortunately, most of the world do not have access to Russian media, and all we have access to is Western media, which we already know is a fake news media. But we will consider the contrasts that are there. You have President Biden, you have President Putin, which means you have the culture of death and you have against the culture of life. That's the contrast. And even when we talk about church, you have Pope Francis and you have Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church. And Pope Francis, modernism, Patriarch Kirill, orthodoxy. The Orthodox Church, but orthodoxy. These are the contrasts that are there. And we need to see that. So you pray for Russia. Do not condemn Russia. Condemn the war that is happening, yes. But Russia put in these are the good guys here. Believe me or not, but you study it more, you see the information that is there, and so pray for Russia, and pray for the conversion of the godless West. So that's the first thing. Secondly, pray the Rosary daily, because at Fatima, maybe Mary appeared as Our Lady of the Rosary. And she said to the children, pray the Rosary daily. And this is what we are trying to do in community. And community is consecrated to Our Lady of the Rosary, also known as Our Lady of Victory. We are engaged in spiritual war, really, really intense spiritual war. No? And one spiritual weapon given to us by God through Mary is the Rosary. This is the weapon that we as holy warriors have. So pray the Rosary daily. Number 3, look to the 5 consecutive first Saturdays. Because in 1925, the child Jesus and Mary appeared to Lucia, and talked about this 5 consecutive first Saturdays. So every first Saturday of the month, and 5 months thereafter, go to confession, receive Holy Communion, pray 5 decades of the Rosary, and meditate on the mysteries of the Rosary for 15 minutes. This meditation is separate from praying the Rosary. So confession, communion, Rosary, and meditation. Do that for 5 consecutive first Saturdays. And that's part of the spirituality that comes into the church, in order that the intent of God will be fulfilled. Number 4, you need to know what is going on. Not just everything that I'm saying here. If much of what I've said here is new to you, you need to be better informed. You need to know what is going on, especially in our church. Now, there's regular info being provided for you by the Hermit of Antipolo. I don't know if you've heard of the Hermit of Antipolo, but look him up in his website, where in effect what is happening is this important information, this relevant information. There's so much happening throughout the world, so much. And none of us can keep up with all of that. But what happens is the Hermit of Antipolo, in a way, selects. Of course, he also cannot see everything, but people also give him inputs what other people see. So anyway, what happens is he goes through all of this, and then he selects, and then he spoon feeds it to you, and he tells you this thing. This is an easy reading. It's not so too long. But if you are reading these things every day or every time they come out, then you have no reason to be unaware of what is happening in the world, especially in what is relevant, like to our church. Remember, it is the end times. So Jesus says we need to be alert. We need to stay awake. We need to be prepared. We are in this intense spiritual warfare. So you need to know the enemy. You need to know what the enemy is doing, and you need to be able to respond. We know the basic way to respond, but to look at specific things that are happening, especially the lies, the disinformation that continues to be brought out. So we need to all know that. Know what is going on. And then number 5, speak out prophetically. Because this apostasy has come into the church, and then if we believe, I hope you believe, these apparitions, not just Fatima, but the others as well, right now, in these times, towards the end of the last millennium, and now continuing in these days, the great apostasy that is happening in the church, and even in the very center, the very top of our church. So this is filtering all the way down the line. That's why our church is in such bad shape. We need to speak out prophetically when we see that things are wrong that are being said. And if you have the opportunity, you know, for example, in one priest recently, when the gospel was about the multiplication of the loaves and the bread, you know, he said that the multiplication of the loaves and the bread was just a miracle of sharing. That was the miracle. People actually had their food with them, and they shared. Ridiculous. And you want to totally eliminate the supernatural, the miracle of God, that Jesus actually took, no, the loaves of bread and the fish and multiplied this to feed those thousands of people. But the liberals, the modernists today are teaching, and I've heard this before, actually, long ago, and this seems to be a pattern that this particular teaching, among other things, that wasn't a miracle of multiplication by Jesus. It was just sharing. It's ridiculous, but that is what priests are teaching through their homilies today, for some time now, but even today. So when that happens, you speak to your parish priest and you tell him, Father, I don't think that's right. You know, and let's take a look at this. And if you need to report him to your bishop, go ahead and do that. So speak out more prophetically, especially the lay people. So, brothers and sisters, Mary did say that in the end, my immaculate heart will triumph. And that's what we hold on to. And she did say that, you know, if we do repent of our sin and do the consecration right, Russia will be converted and will be used by God for the renewal of the world. There's much more that will happen with Russia. And looks like the good thing that God intends to happen. So, we do know that the victory belongs to God. But we should not rest secure because of that. Because the question is not that will Jesus be victorious in the end? Of course he will. And the church will be victorious in the end. But the question is, how many will be saved? In the meantime, how many souls will be lost or are being lost? Will more of the world today be overrun by the immoral, godless West? Will more of our church be overrun by modernists and false teachers? So we need to be a part of this work, to be the prophets that God intends for us to be. And of course, to go forth and do our work as holy warriors. God and Mary are looking to you. Amen.